Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome back to Ducks and Pucks podcast. We decided not to take a week off, Eddie, because the Ducks played one game. We weren't sure if we were going to be back this week, but a lot of stuff happened, unfortunately, off the ice, which we'll get into all of that. And the All-Star game, a very, very entertaining tournament, Eddie, with the 3-on-3. We'll get into that too. Perry and Gibson coming up big, not necessarily in the skills competition, but in the tournament. But let's go back to the Boston game, and the Ducks roll in this game, Eddie. They score 6 goals from 6 different players, and it's the most goals the Ducks have scored in a game this season.
Yeah, and I mean, just a great effort, maybe, barring the first minute of the first period where they got scored on early, but they rebounded, before the middle mark of the first period. Perry scores, Perron picks up another point. He ends up getting a goal too later on in the game, which puts him at 5 points in 4 games, and that's turning out to be a great acquisition, not just for the Ducks. I mean, Hagelin is playing well in Pittsburgh too. It really does look like both of them needed a change in scenery, and Theodore, another guy who's playing well lately. I mean, we said at the beginning when he first got called up, he's playing great defensively. He's making some good decisions, other than the one game where he struggled, and he's putting up the points now. He gets a power play goal in this game. It's a really good effort by him on the blue line. He walks the blue line and just releases a laser into the top corner, which is great from him. And then, like I said, Perron scores. Bieksa ends up unloading a blast off the post and in, and in the end they fight to the end. Kessler gets an empty netter, and then Santorelli grabs another one, and Garbett picks up his first point as a Duck, and just a really strong effort from the whole team, and it really looks like they're starting to put the goals in on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and I think the big key in this game, and we've seen this in the last couple games with these new lines, that is the Ducks' willingness to go towards the net. If you look at most of these most of these goals in this game, that's how the Ducks scored. I mean, even on Bieksa's blast, Silverberg goes to the net, creates a screen, and, you get the goal on that play. Santorelli gets one in front of the net, getting in the rebound, throws it in. Perron does the same thing, and that's what we see the Ducks doing. Perry also going to the net, and that's what the Ducks need to do. We saw the Ducks do this the last couple seasons. They're starting to do it in the games lately, and Eddie, it's been paying off. We've been seeing the goals coming and coming in these last 10, 11 games here.
Yeah, and like you said, the new lines are really you can credit for the success so far. I mean, obviously everybody's bought in, like you said, and everybody's crashed in the net and getting back to the style that worked last year. But having 3 lines you can roll, and having Getzlaf on one, Perry on the other, and Kessler on the third. I mean, really, they're all first or second lines. I mean, it's hard to pick out which one you would say is the first, the second, and the third. They're all really strong lines. You've got guys who will crash the net, Getzlaf, Stewart, Perry, Maroon, and then you've got Kessler as well, even Silverberg on that line too, and Cogliano. So the skill in the lineup is just split up among those 3 lines, and teams are struggling. They'll shut down one, and another one will do well. And in this game, I mean, all 4 they played a great effort in this game.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. And I just wrote an article about this over on the Hockey Writers website. If you go check it out, I talk about the goal differential and all that. And if you look at that, Eddie, I mean, you look at the Getzlaf line in these last 3 games plus the third period against the Kings. They've got 3 goals. You look at the Kessler line with 4 goals. And then you go with the Perry line with 4 goals. So the goals have been even between the 3 lines pretty much. And like you said, it's difficult for opposing teams to try and shut down, all these lines before they take their best defensemen and stack them against Raquel, Perry, and Getzlaf. And now they can't do that. They cannot focus on one line. There's the 3 lines, as you said. And I don't even refer to them as really 1, 2, and 3 anymore. And you and I talked about this last week and even, before on this show. It's really the Getzlaf, Perry, and Kessler line. And the way that the Ducks are doing with these three lines, I mean, we've talked about it, and Boudreaux changes the lines, and obviously the trade deadline is, 4.5 weeks away or whatnot. But it's going to be interesting to see. I would like to see them keep these lines, Eddie. If they go do and pick up other players, which, there's a lot of rumors. We'll talk about some of those later in the show. They may change them up, but you really got to like what you've seen here in the last three games. The Ducks have got 3 wins in a row. They've outscored the opponents 13-6. And there's nothing you can really complain about. The Ducks have just been on a roll in the last week and a half or so.
Yeah, and it's just a coach's nightmare to have to match up against these guys. I mean, you could shut down 2 of these lines and you still got arguably a superstar coming out over the boards, and eventually you're going to get a favorable matchup if you're the Ducks. I mean, you've got Getzlaf out there. Maybe if they decide to focus on that line, then that either frees up Perry's line or that frees up Kessler's line, and that's what we've been seeing. We've been seeing the Ducks getting better matchups against the other team's third and fourth lines, and it's been paying off.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a nightmare for the other teams. That is the key. And it's a balanced scoring attack, as I talked about earlier with the Ducks on these several lines. And that's what they're going to have to keep doing and keep going as far as, in the future here. And we'll talk about the games coming up this week, too. The balanced attack has really been the key. In the fourth line, you just kind of put whoever you got out there. Obviously Santorelli chipped in that last game against Boston, which was great. Garbett got a goal, got an assist on that goal, and that helped out as well. So I think all things are well as far as the way the Ducks have been playing on the ice, Eddie. I think the big concern that we have to talk about is kind of why we did the podcast this week is what's happened off the ice. Unfortunately, we had some surprising and bad news with Horcoff this week. It came out early in the morning after the Boston game. We found out that he had tested positive for PEDs or performance-enhancing drugs and was suspended 20 games, Eddie. So it's unfortunate. I think by the statement that he made that it was an honest mistake, going by what he said. But I do think this does change the strategy, maybe, or maybe not necessarily change the strategy. Maybe speeds it up a little bit for Murray and the Ducks. I do think that with this going on, Eddie, that the Ducks may try to get another forward as soon as possible because if they don't, they're going to have to bring up somebody, maybe Richie again, which I don't doubt that they may not do, but I think they got to try and get someone else because Horcoff's going to be out to almost the end of the season.
Yeah, and the only problem with bringing up a guy from the AHL is the way they've been working the forwards is somebody's been coming in and getting scratched and then somebody gets pulled out of the lineup, and I think with how well Stewart and Perron and Getzlaf are doing, I don't see it being him. Sekach is gone, so you would expect them not to bench the new guy in Garbett, and then you would have to bench Santorelli. And the new guy, the guy coming from the AHL, either Richie or Nason or whoever comes up, they're gonna have to play because they're not gonna want them to be scratched. Otherwise, they just send them back down to the AHL. So it kind of does create a little bit of an issue. I mean, definitely even before this happened, they'd be looking at forwards, and we've heard Murray talk about it that maybe he's not looking at some of the big names out there, and he's definitely looking, but we'll still have to wait and see it. But it does create an interesting situation, that's for sure.
And it kind of goes into the bunch of the fan questions we had this week. We had one by Adam. He asked about trading. Whether or not Fowler or Vatanen would be, more likely to be traded. And it's kind of interesting in this, Fowler, we had a report that he was skating, working on his own while the rest of the guys were taking a break on the All-Star weekend, excluding Gibson and Perry, obviously. But, I don't know. There were some other reports out there that Murray does not want to trade Lindholm and Vatanen. We've heard Vatanen's name been thrown out there. But I also think you got to get Fowler back too. I don't know. I don't know if the Ducks would trade either one of those, Eddie. I mean, I know we're fat on the blue line. I think maybe we would trade somebody to get another forward. But Fowler and Vatanen, I would think the Ducks would try to keep those guys because they've been solid for the Ducks on the blue line.
Yeah, I mean, we've been asked this question multiple times after definitely Murray's comments and the other trades is that we have a lot of depth on D. Everybody's recognized that. I mean, Sportsnet here, TSN, NHL Network, ESPN, NBC, they've all mentioned at one time or another the Ducks have a wealth of depth on D. There's creating an issue with Fowler and Dupre coming back, and who would most likely to be moved, if anybody. And I think, to answer the question, with Fowler just coming back from injury, having a decent amount of time laid off with injury, I really doubt that they deal him. Maybe if he doesn't get injured and they play, he's been playing, since then. There might be a little bit more of a competition between Vaughton and Fowler to see who gets moved. But we've been talking, for the last couple podcasts that if anybody is to get moved, it you would think it would be Vaughton. I mean, that's the most likely option. He would be the guy that would get you a higher return, other than Fowler. But you're not going to deal a guy who just came back from injury. I think we all agree that Lindholm is a guy that we would all love to keep. He's a two-way defenseman for the future for the Ducks. I mean, not to say Vaughton isn't a defenseman we would like to have in the future, but if you're looking to add scoring or add another forward, he's definitely the guy you would expect to be the most likely to be traded.
And that brings us to another question about Vatanen. Tyler asks, okay, if the Ducks are going to trade Vatanen, as the deadline approaches, then who do you look as far as forwards for the Ducks to pick up? And we've kind of addressed this before. There's reports from Colorado that have been out for a couple of months that Duchesne is one of the names out of there, which we talked about that. And there's actually one of the sources close to the team told me that the Ducks are interested in Duchesne. I have not heard if there was ever any formal, negotiations or whatnot, but that's going to be a hard sell with him and his $6 million price tag. So I don't know if Duchesne is one. We also heard some stuff recently about Eriksson, which, Eddy and I are really big on Louis Eriksson, and a lot of people are as well. That one, I don't know. We'd have to see how that one would go as well. And then probably another one that we talked about is Winnipeg being involved with the Ducks. Bufflin and Ladd being some names that have been mentioned, and now it looks like Ladd's more towards the forefront. That's kind of who I lean towards, but I don't know, Eddie. We're going to have to see which forwards, but of those, four names that I mentioned, I think that those players, a majority of them do get moved by the trade deadline. The question is whether or not they go to the Ducks. I don't know. I would like to get some of those guys, but I don't want to sell the farm at the same time.
Yeah, and you look at Murray's comments recently. He's kind of said, and a lot of people have leaned to it as well. He's more so looking for a younger guy who he can control.
Yes.
He doesn't want a UFA per se. It doesn't mean he won't sign one for sure. But you would expect him to, if he could, to deal for a guy who he could control, he could keep under the books for a couple of years, who still has a chance to develop. I mean, we saw him trade Sackhouse. That's why I was a little bit surprised we got rid of him. I know we would have had to sign him, but it is a little bit a difficult situation. But the names you did mention, Ladd would fit really well in this lineup. Eriksson for sure. They're both UFAs at the end of the season. Duchesne would be a tough sell. I mean, with Horcoff going down for 20 games, it does open up a center spot where I know we've had Maroon taking a couple faceoffs on that line with Raquel and Perry, and now it opens up a spot where if you could acquire a center of that caliber and not give up the farm and be able to fit him under the cap, then he would fit perfectly, I think, on that line with Perry and Raquel, and it would be nothing short of amazing to pick up a player of that caliber. But I mean, he is an NHL All-Star as well this year, so. But I think if anybody doesn't get dealt, Duchesne's a guy who will probably stay in Colorado, or somebody else. More looking for a first line center. Maybe Ottawa Senators would be more interested in Matt Duchesne. But I think it opens up a little bit more opportunities. But we'll have to wait and see. I mean, Murray always likes to pull out a surprise.
Yeah, and that's the thing. All these names that we see get mentioned, and sometimes it's a player that's not even mentioned at all, Eddie. That's one thing that we have to look and watch out for, because Murray's comments, he's talked about players out there that aren't on the trade deadline, and that are on the rumor mill. So it's hard to tell what's going on. I mean, we're trying to throw out what we see and what we hear, and those are the big names probably most involved with the Ducks. But we're going to have to wait and see on that front. We've also had more questions about Perron and Perron's play, so we'll go to some of those for you as well. Raymond asks about Perron and if he's the missing piece. And will that stop the Ducks from making trades from forwards? I do think he helps out big time. We talked about this before, putting him with Stewart. They played in St. Louis together for 2.5 seasons. I think it's huge. I think Getzlaf, Stewart, and Perron on that line are working out well. So we talked about 2 goals and 3 assists in 4 games. I think it's great, Eddie. I think he's worked out. He's also been on the power play, but I don't think it's enough. I still think the Ducks need to make another move.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely it's been beneficial picking him up. It's worked out. He's benefited from moving back to the Western Conference. I mean, he's benefited from playing with Getzlaf, that's for sure, and he fits the style of play. I mean, he's done everything right. He got a little bit lucky on the first goal against Quick, but I mean, what can you do? You got to get lucky sometimes, and I just like how he's fit. I mean, as for re-signing him, I think it's a little early. It's only been 4 games into his time with the Ducks. I think you have to reevaluate that at the end of the season, or at the after the playoffs are over as well. That's when I think it'd be better time to answer that question. I mean, he started off hot right now, but to say that he's going to continue and score 5 points in 4 games, if continuing for the rest of the season, I mean that's a long stretch to say that, but definitely a great start for a guy that's helped the Ducks so far.
And that kind of goes in line with another question from Matt. He asked about, should the Ducks re-sign Perron if he continues to do well? And I think the answer to that is yes, Eddie, based upon what we've talked about. But as you said, it really depends on what's going to happen. We still have, almost half the season to go here. I like him. I like the style of play he does. We talked about this. We need more players to go to the net. You see him doing that. You see Stewart doing that. And you put him with Getzlaf, who passes more than shoots, and it works out. But, I don't want to get too overconfident. Like you said, it's only been 4 games.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys coming up UFAs at the end of the season. Obviously, Horcoff, Stewart, Cianarelli, now Perron as well. And you gotta look at you gotta sit in Bob Mary's seat and look at some of the youngsters we have in the AHL with San Diego. I mean, will Richie be ready next year? Will Cadillas be ready next year? Will Nason be ready next year? I mean, that's all things they'll sit down, they'll look at. They'll look at Perron's performance. I mean, obviously Stewart's a guy they'll consider re-signing as well. You never know with Horcoff or Cianarelli either. They're all guys they'll look at and see if they'll benefit the team. I mean, if he continues producing at this pace, why not re-sign him? I mean, he's a quality player. He's got second line potential in my opinion, and we freed up all that cap space by letting Hagelin go. That money could go to him. A possibility. So.
I agree. I mean, and even with what's going on right now, I like the way that he's played and what I've seen so far. So I would be happy to resign him for sure. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other RFAs that we got to figure out, and that kind of brings us to the blue line situation. There was more news about the Ducks this week. Not so favorable news, but the Ducks send Clendening down on waivers, trying to get him down to San Diego. And for the second time this season, Eddie, the Ducks got snake bit on the waiver wire. First it was Wagner, now it's Clendening who got picked up over by Edmonton.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think they expect him to clear. I think they would have been happy if he cleared waivers, but I mean, it would have been surprising if he did, to be honest. There was no option. They had to send him down with Dupré coming back and Fowler eventually coming back. That he wouldn't play for the Ducks this season. He had to go play for San Diego, and I mean, I don't think they're too disappointed that he got sent down. I mean, that he got picked up. I mean, it does suck, and we saw it with Wagner as well. But it's not like he's going to go off and be a top 2 defenseman in the NHL. It's not like he's a hot prospect. The same thing with Wagner. He's playing on the 4th line. He's putted a couple goals for the Avalanche, but with the depth the Ducks have, it's nothing that's going to hurt them in the long run. I mean, we do have Montour, who is a right shot offensive defenseman right there, who fits the mold and is arguably going to be a better player than Clendening anyway. But that does change the aspect of the trade. It kind of does turn into a 1-for-1 now with Perron for Hagelin, which honestly right now I'm okay with.
Yeah, I know a lot of people were upset, obviously, with the waiver wire situation, which is ridiculous. I think I talked about it earlier on Twitter or something this week, but trying to go through the CBA and figure out everything. it's kind of frustrating trying to understand the rules and what happens as far as when players get sent down and get picked up. I wasn't really that upset with Clendening, other than maybe we could have used him in a trade down the line. But with him gone, the Ducks then decided to send Theodore down. He ended up playing in one game for the Gulls this past weekend. And, he's probably going to come back, Eddie. We've seen this before. Players go down during the All-Star break, especially when they're waiver exempt, like Theodore is on an entry-level contract, and he hasn't played a certain amount of games in the year and all that stuff, which I've referred to some of that on social media as far as the different rules to the CBA, so he can come back, up no problem this season. So I think he will. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. We also had the news with Stoner this week. He ended up pleading guilty. He ended up paying a fine of $10,000, and he's been banned from hunting bears for 3 years. We believe in Canada area as far as what the reports have shown. So it doesn't look like the league's going to take any action on Stoner, but the Ducks are going to have enough players on the blue line still, Eddie. So it's going to be interesting to see if they bring Theodore up and then they trade somebody, or what they decide to do. Because right now, there's plenty of players. I mean, they're all going to have to go through waivers if anybody gets sent down. That includes Manson as well, which we thought maybe he could sneak down, but some of the rules in the CBA count his games in Norfolk, so he too would have to pass through waivers. So I think out of all the players that the Ducks have now, if they were to send somebody down, I think Holzer might be the most likely candidate, Eddie.
Yeah, I don't expect to see him get picked up if he gets sent down, but even if Theodore gets called up, which we all expect. I mean, when he first got sent down, I reacted in a way as much as the fans did, and saying, well, why did he get sent down? But I forgot the All-Star game, the weekend was there, and that the AHL is still playing games, so it makes sense. I mean, they're sending him down for conditioning. He gets to play that one game, and, stay fresh and be able to come back on Tuesday, not behind. He's a step ahead of everybody else. I mean, it's definitely beneficial for his development as well. But it's a tough situation. Normally, you'd say, "Oh, he's played well. He's definitely going to get called back up." There's no surprise. He's waiver exempt. He can just get called up and he's going to play right away. But with Fowler, you would expect him to hopefully be back against San Jose or LA or Arizona this week, and then that creates a situation that we've been talking about for a while, is having everybody back healthy. I mean, you've got Lindholm, you've got Vatanen, you've got Bieksa, Dupre, Fowler, Stoner, Theodore, Holzer, Manson. I mean, you've got all those guys that are able to play. I mean, Holzer, like you said, is probably the odd man out, but then you've still got too many guys, and the only guy that you can send down without the possibility of losing him is Theodore. And I mean, we all would love to see him play in the NHL, but I mean, until they make a deal, he might have to stay in San Diego.
I agree. It's going to be difficult because you've got 8 guys right now on the team, which the Ducks may carry 8 defensive men down the stretch. I really think the Ducks will trade a defenseman, and I think that Theodore will come back up and play. Who it's going to be, it's going to be tough. Dupree came back and he looks good and ready to go. Had a great game against Boston, so it's going to be tough to see. Stoner has that big contract. I don't know if they'll be able to move that. They've talked about keeping Lindholm and Vatanen, and obviously, as we said before, Vatanen's. So it's going to be interesting to see. I still think the Ducks will trade somebody from the blue line to get another forward, and then that would allow Theodore to come back up. But it's going to be crazy. That this next 4 weeks or so is going to be very intense to see what happens. And this coming up trip here. This next week, actually, where the Ducks are going to play these games, they're going to play the 3 teams ahead of them this week, Eddie. They're going to play Arizona, San Jose, and LA. They're going to play Arizona and San Jose at home. They're going to go to LA to play the Kings. This is a big week for the Ducks. These are these 4-point games we talked about. You really want to beat Arizona and San Jose. The Ducks have not had success against Arizona. They've lost 2 in regulation and 1 in overtime. San Jose, they have won 2 out of 3. So they have had some success, and the Kings, obviously, they lost that last game by 1 goal. But this is a huge week. The Ducks are sitting there at 4th. They're 2 points out of a playoff spot. They've got a couple games in hand against the Kings in Arizona, 1 game in hand against San Jose. So this is a critical week coming up here, Eddie.
Yeah, and I mean, right into the fire against San Jose on Tuesday. I mean, they're 8-0-2 in their last 10. They're one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest, in the last 10 games. And they've been amazing on the road. They've been poor at home, and they're 16-6-2 on the road. I mean, and all the games against them this season, I mean, we've won two of them, both 1-0, and lost 2-0 back in October against them. But it's going to be a tough game. I mean, they're like I said, they've been great on the road. Everybody's got to come back from the All-Star break. I mean, they sent Pavelski and Burns, and we sent Perry and Gibson. And I mean, those guys had a great time there, but we're gonna have to get right back into it, and they're gonna come off their Pacific Division championship in the All-Star game and have to play against each other back, on Tuesday. And it's a big game for both teams. San Jose can widen the gap if they get a win, but these next three games coming up, like you said, are just huge games. Where the standings are right now, the Ducks coming off winning three straight into the All-Star break, starting to score some more goals, and it's going to be tough. I mean, you would want them to beat San Jose and Arizona for sure to get those two 4-point games under their belt and move back up into the Pacific. I mean, if they win those two games, you could see them are possibly being second in the Pacific Division, come next Monday.
Yeah, Eddie. I mean, the importance of this week, I don't know how else to put it in any other words. Like you said, the Ducks really need to win all three of these games, in my opinion. They need to beat the Sharks, they need to beat the Kings, and they need to beat Arizona. Maybe the Kings not so much because they're so far up in front, but you want to beat them. They're your rival, and they edged out that last game with the controversial no goal we talked about, which still was the right call. But either way, I think the Ducks need to get 3 wins this week. That's just the bottom line. I mean, they're going to play back-to-backs with the Kings in Arizona Thursday and Friday. I would look to see Gibson probably start on Tuesday, and then maybe Anderson and Gibson split the 2 games on Thursday and Friday. Obviously that's just going off my opinion, but that's what I would kind of see this week, and then we're just going to have to, go from there. I mean, after that, the Ducks go on a big road trip on an eastern swing. And then into Canada too as well. So they're going to have 2 weeks on the road after that. So it's I mean, it's just important. The Ducks need to win these 3 games, Eddie.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I mean, having the two technically the two most important in San Jose and in Arizona at home, is definitely going to help. They've been a lot better at home than they have been on the road. The only issue is having the back to back. So you got to play LA in LA, and then you've got to go to Arizona the next night and play them, and they've whooped us 3-0 this season so far, and it's going to be tough. And we've said this I don't know how many times at different stretches where they played 3 Pacific Divisions teams in a row where the standings have mattered, that this is one of the most important stretches of the season. And right now at this point in the season, this is it. This is the most important 3 games stretch that they've had so far, and the way it affects the standings, playing the 3 teams in front of you. I mean, if you come out and you lose all 3 of these, that puts you in a hole. I mean, you're wasted that game in hand, or 2 games in hand you've had against Arizona, and unless they struggle or unless San Jose struggles in their other games, then you're in a hole, and you've got to fight out of that hole again. So I think it's definitely important. I mean, winning 3 is going to be hard, but if you can win 2, especially against San Jose and Arizona, that's big.
I agree, Eddie. I mean, the Ducks have to win at least 2 of these 3 games for sure. Going into this next week again, playing 3 Pacific Division rivals, all 3 above you. So that's what we're going to look for this coming up week. Also on Thursday, when the Ducks play the Kings, we have another watch party coming up. January was kind of a hectic month, but we're back. We're going to be at El Ranchito in Orange, 182 South Orange Street. You can show up anytime before 7 o'clock. We will have free giveaways, and we'll watch the game and hang out, have some good food, and it'll be a good time. So hopefully you can make that. The only other part to really cover this week, Eddie, was the All-Star game, which wasn't really a game. It was more a tournament. But, I wasn't really a big fan of the All-Star game in the past. And I have to say I was pretty excited with what I saw tonight in the All-Star game. Obviously the Pacific beating out the Central, then the Pacific winning the championship. You saw all the John Scott fanfare, which was just amazing. Him scoring those 2 goals in the first matchup. And in the second matchup, you had Quick shutting out in the first half, Gibson with a shutout in the second half, and Perry with the game-winning goal. So it was a pretty good night for the Ducks tonight. With our two All-Stars.
Yeah, I thought it was great this year. I mean, the skills competition was pretty much the same as it's been every year. I mean, I still enjoy it. I sit down and I watch it, but it's about the same as it is every year, and there's not much you can change in that. And honestly, that's fine. But the big difference, like you said, is the All-Star game this year is a lot of times I just don't watch it. But this year it was really fun to watch, and the only thing that worries me is I love the fact that John Scott was in the All-Star game and it worked out so well. I mean, he scored 2 goals, he won the MVP, and that's great. But next year, I mean, he probably won't be there. And that's a problem. I mean, how do you top it this year? I mean, he was the reason that this All-Star game was so fun and fun to watch and everything this year. So how do you top it next year? I mean, he's not going to be there. I hope they don't vote in another enforcer and make it a thing. I mean, this should only be a one-time thing, and it was great that he was there. But what do you do now? What do you do to top this? I mean, they've had issues with the All-Star game before and trying to make it fun. And yes, the 3-on-3 was fun and the way it was played in the tournament. But I think if John Scott isn't there, this All-Star game isn't as fun and people aren't as into it, right? So that's the only problem I have with it for next year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was interesting. He got those 2 goals. If you haven't seen him, you can go on Twitter on the Puck Network. That's up on there. You can also go on Facebook.com/the Puck Network. The goals are up on there as well. It was just hilarious to see him get those goals, and then Kane gets that goal, and then they go pretend to fight. I mean, it was pretty entertaining. The first matchup that the Pacific was in against the Central. So, like you said, it was very, very entertaining. It is going to be hard to match. I was surprised too in the championship game. It was just low scoring. Perry had 2 goals, one of which was disallowed. The second one was goalie interference, which it was the right call. I mean, this game's for fun, so it's not a big deal. But I was happy to see the way that Perry and Gibson did play. If you go back and you can go on ducksandpucks.com and also on the YouTube channel, you can see the skills competition. Gibson didn't play as well in the skills competition, and Perry did okay. He did good in the shooting accuracy competition. He nailed 4 of the targets and 6 goals, but then the other ones he had a little bit of a hard time. But it was good to see the way that they played in that championship game. They played very well, and I know it's only 2 players in the Ducks, and it's not saying much, but it's good to see them do well and maybe come back and carry a little bit of momentum in their play. If you want to talk about the Ducks players and who's been the most valuable to the team this year, I mean, you have to look at Perry with his 20 goals, and you have to look at Gibson's play throughout the season. Also being the rookie of the year, or excuse me, rookie of the month for December. So I like the way that things turned out tonight, Eddie.
Yeah, I mean, Gibson did struggle in that shootout contest in the All-Star skills competition, and I mean, he pretty much only stopped 1 puck, which is not too surprising. I mean, I don't think it's out there to say that Gibson's weakest point of his game is probably breakaways, so it was kind of a tough competition for him. Perry did really well in the accuracy. I don't think anybody's surprised, and he took the down low slapper on the relay, which is one of the harder shots. I mean, you see Stamkos and Tarasenko and other guys taking those shots, so it's not a hard one. I mean, it's not an easy one to put in the net. And no, I think it was just a great day. And obviously that final was a good day for the Ducks. Perry almost had 2. Eventually does get the one in the game winner, and Gibby gets a shutout and makes just an incredible save. If that's in a game, that's save of the year against Tyler Seguin. I mean, he stretches out with the splits and just gets it with like the pick of his skate. But yeah, no, just a fun game to watch. I think really exciting and obviously great that the Pacific Division won. I think if you had a pick before that the Pacific Division would win, people would think you're mental that they would have beat the Central Division.
Yeah, I think that was the the irony in the whole situation, Eddie, was that not only did the Pacific win, but then John Scott gets the MVP at the end too. With all the drama surrounding the vote and him getting traded, and then he's not going to be in the All-Star game, and then he is in the All-Star game. So, I mean, I just have to crack up. I mean, I thought that the way everything went was extremely well, but I have to go back to your point too. It's going to be extremely tough for the NHL to top this All-Star weekend. I think if they do a 3-on-3 thing, it may be just as well. I thought that was exciting. That was more exciting than the 5-on-5. But like you said, they're gonna have to do something to make next year even more special.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, pretty much every sport is having problems with an all-star game and how to make it more exciting. I mean, the NBA is having issues with it. They still have the dunk contest, and I think they've got the format that seems to work for their players and for their fans. And the NFL, they always have an issue with the Pro Bowl, and people won't go in to watch that. And it's just tough, and it gets boring after a while, and it's the same thing. And kudos to the NHL for allowing John Scott to eventually play. I mean, after they kind of created this whole mockery of it and getting him traded, and so that he can't play. But it ended up turning out to be a great event, and all the fans voting him MVP was great at that. I mean, he did put up a strong effort. He did score 2 goals too, so it wasn't like
Legit.
he didn't do anything and got MVP, which was pretty cool too.
Yeah, he scored some legit goals too, and the only other issue with the All-Star game is, I mean, you could try to do like the NFL, you could try to have it at the end of the season, but then it's hard. The NFL goes, if you don't know, they go to Hawaii and they play their Pro Bowl after the season's over. I mean, that's something the NHL, I'm not saying they go to Hawaii, but I mean, maybe they try and change that at the end of the season. I don't know, because then it's tough. Once the season's over, then the interest is not there as much. But I'm just glad that the one big thing that happened this weekend too, we didn't see anybody get seriously injured, Eddie, which is a key thing. You hate to see someone go into this All-Star game, play for fun, in the skills competition, and obviously for this year the tournament, and get hurt. So that was a good thing all the way around.
Yeah, I think the only issue with the All-Star game, if it was to be at the end of the season, is I still think the World Championship of Hockey is going on, even though the World Cup of Hockey is now a thing. I think they're still doing the World Championships, and even if they weren't, I mean, usually that's at the end of the season. The World Cup of Hockey now is in August, I believe. It's right, or August or September. It's right before the season starts, and having, say, the NHL the whole season, the playoffs, the All-Star game right after that, and then having them go off and then have to come back in September and play the World Cup of Hockey for all the superstars. I mean, that's a season, playoffs, All-Star game, and then World Cup of Hockey, and then back to season, playoffs, every year. And that would be tough, especially this year. So I like how they did it. And like you said, obviously, luckily nobody got hurt. There was a couple spills. I think Doughty crashed into the boards a bit there, and so did Subban. And luckily they came off with no injuries, because that's something all GMs are worried about. I mean, Sutter sitting behind the bench for the Pacific Division team. I'm sure he saw Doughty crash in the boards and cringe a little bit, but luckily everybody came out okay.
Yeah, it was a good weekend all the way around. Like we talked about, I wasn't as big on the All-Star game in years past, and then this year was a little bit more exciting, and I'm happy to see Gibson and Perry obviously do well, especially towards the end there. So, we're just going to have to wait and see how this week goes. As we talked about, 3 big division games. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to have a watch party at El Ranchito on Thursday against the Kings. Show up, we'll hang out, have some drinks and some food, and hopefully we'll beat the Kings. We haven't really had a good record at the watch party, so I'm hoping we turn it around. But then again, those were early in the season too, and the Ducks weren't doing as well. So look for that. We're constantly making improvements on the website and doing all kinds of stuff. I put some posts out there about all the other things that we're trying to do to give credit to the different sources out there that we use, and also help you find information out on your own as well. So look for all the updates on the website. And Eddie and I will be back next week, and hopefully we'll be talking about how the Ducks did well this coming up week. Let's go Ducks.